Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! So, I work as a security guard at one of the hospitals in our city. My typical day involves dealing with everything from combative patients and visitors to patrolling the hospital grounds. Occasionally, we're asked to assist people in getting out of their vehicles and wheeling them to the emergency department, or their appointments at on-site clinics. Now, on this particular evening, a couple of nurses approached our office with an unusual request. They had received a call from a man named Gerald who claimed he was in severe pain and needed help getting out of his car. I headed out with the nurses, wheelchair in tow, and radioed my partner for backup since it sounded like a two-person job. It took us a bit to locate Gerald, but his insistent car horn honking served as our beacon. Let me tell you, I've dealt with my fair share of dramatic people in this line of work, but Gerald was something else. He regaled us with his woes, detailing his excruciating pain, how he'd driven himself to the hospital but couldn't manage the car anymore, and how urgently he needed treatment. We offered our assistance, but he stubbornly refused to grab our arms or hands for support, instead relying on a car door and a wheelchair to maneuver himself. Once he settled into the wheelchair, he requested that I move his vehicle to a better parking spot, as he had a handicap sticker and needed the space for when he was done with his hospital visit. Feeling a bit uneasy about the situation, I reluctantly agreed and moved his car to a handicapped spot near the emergency department entrance. With Gerald safely checked in the emergency department, I thought our involvement was over. Little did I know how wrong I was. Less than 20 minutes later, I received word that Gerald wanted to leave and needed assistance getting back into his car. He's begun complaining loudly about the wait time, mind you. The emergency department was packed with patients who had been waiting for hours, but Gerald couldn't bear to stay even a few minutes. I did my due diligence and checked with the emergency department staff, expressing concerns about his ability to drive. They informed me that legally they couldn't detain him since he hadn't been triaged, and he was adamant about leaving despite their busy workload. So I returned to the emergency department and asked him point blank if he was sure he wanted to leave. I didn't want to be held responsible if he drove away and got into an accident. However, he insisted, saying he couldn't stand being there any longer and wanted to leave right away. Reluctantly, I wheeled him out of the emergency department towards his car, and here is where the malicious compliance kicked in. Gerald announced, "When we get to my car, I'm gonna call an ambulance." I blinked and asked, "Wait, what?" Gerald elaborated, "Yeah, I'm gonna call an ambulance. I can't drive and I don't like anyone here except you. They are too slow here and I'm not spending all night here. Calling an ambulance will get me to a room quicker and I can get help with my pain." I couldn't believe my ears. "So, you want to call an ambulance to take you to the emergency department when you're already here at the emergency department? And all because the wait time is too long for you?" "Yeah." So I cautioned him. "You do realize that if you call an ambulance, they might just take you back to the waiting area and make you wait there, right?" He shrugged, unfazed. "Yeah, I know that. I'm still gonna call." At that point, there was nothing more I could do. I'm just a security guard, not a doctor. So I helped him into his car, and with a perplexed shake of my head, I let him carry out his plan. I pushed the wheelchair back inside and resumed my duties, thinking the absurdity had peaked. About 30 minutes later, I was reviewing CCTV footage when I saw something that left my jaw on the floor. There, right next to Gerald's car, was an ambulance. The guy had actually called 911 and they had responded. I watched in disbelief as the EMTs assisted him onto a gurney and loaded him into the ambulance. Then, to my utter shock, they drove off campus. I had assumed they would return him to the emergency department, but nope, they headed for another hospital. Two things dawned on me. First, Gerald was now being transported to another hospital, possibly prolonging his ordeal. Second, when he eventually got discharged, he'd be stuck without a ride because, well, you guessed it, his car remained at our hospital. Plus, our policy dictated that if a vehicle sat in our lot for an extended period without the owner present, we had to notify the police and report it as abandoned. This guy is about to accumulate additional medical expenses, potentially endure more wait time at another hospital's emergency department, and face potential fines for deserting his vehicle, all because he couldn't tolerate waiting in the emergency department with everyone else. I had always been a hard-working man and I took great pride in my small business. I ran an online store from my home in a wealthy neighborhood of Maple Tree Estate, fake name of course, and I had always been careful to keep my work separate from my personal life. I made sure that there were no disruptions to my neighbors, and I thought that I was doing everything right. However, the Homeowners Association, or HOA, did not see things the same way. The president of the HOA, Mr. Charles, took issue with me running my business from my home, and he kept fining me for what he saw as a violation of the rules. I tried to explain to Mr. Charles that I was doing nothing wrong, but he was unwilling to listen. He saw my business as a blight on the neighborhood, and he was determined to shut it down. "You can't run a business from your home, John," Mr. Charles told me at one of our HOA meetings. "It is not allowed according to the rules of the community." "I am not disturbing anyone, Mr. Charles," I replied, trying to remain calm. "I run an online store and all of my transactions are done over the internet. There is no noise or foot traffic coming to my house." "That may be true, but the rules are the rules," Mr. Charles said sternly. "If you don't stop running your business from your home, I will have no choice but to fine you again." I knew that there was no reasoning with that man, so I decided to take a different approach. I began to openly defy the HOA's rules, setting up my business in a more visible location in my home and making a point to disrupt the quiet of the neighborhood. At first, Mr. Charles was enraged by my rebellion. He fined me more and more, trying to force me to comply with the rules, but I refused to back down. I believed that I had a right to run my business from my home, and I was not going to be bullied by the HOA. As it turned out, I was not alone in my belief. Many of the other residents of Maple Tree Estate had grown tired of Mr. Charles' heavy-handed approach, and they began to stand with me in my fight against the HOA. One day, Mr. Charles and several members of the HOA decided to take matters into their own hands. While I was away from my house, they broke in and confiscated all of my office equipment and assets. They left a note saying that they would not release the items until I signed a written consent, agreeing to stop running my business from my home. What Mr. Charles and the HOA did not know was that my elderly father was in the house at the time of the break-in. When they confronted him, he was terrified and grabbed a gun to protect himself. He held the intruders at gunpoint until the police arrived and arrested them on the spot for charges including breaking and entering and theft. "I can't believe they would do something like this," my father said to me when I returned home and found out what had happened. "They have no right to treat you this way." I couldn't believe it either. I felt violated and angry that Mr. Charles and the HOA had thought that they could just waltz into my home and take my belongings. But at the same time, I was grateful to my father for protecting our property and standing up for what was right. The news of the incident spread like wildfire, and the residents of Maple Tree Estate were shocked and outraged. Many had grown tired of the HOA president's heavy-handed approach and saw the break-in as a clear violation of my rights. After pressing criminal charges against Mr. Charles and the HOA members who had broken into my home, the case went to court. The evidence against them was strong, and it was clear that they had acted illegally in breaking into my home and taking my belongings. The judge ruled in my favor, and Mr. Charles and the HOA members were found guilty of breaking and entering and theft. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison, while the other members were sentenced to probation and ordered to pay restitution for the damages and stolen items. In addition to the criminal charges, Mr. Charles and the HOA members were also forced to resign from all their positions before the court verdict was out. The community was in uproar over the incident, and it was clear that they had lost the trust and respect other residents. I was relieved that justice had been served. The incident had been a trying time for me, but I was glad to have come out on the other side. From that point on, I was able to run my business from my home without any further problems. It is. Because some seemed confused about the confiscating part and how they left me a note, but also got arrested on spot after they managed to confiscate most of the equipment in my office. They left me the note on my desk, but was interrupted when they saw my father closing in on them with his gun pointed at them and ordering them not to move until the cops arrived. I'd never thought I'd be seeking advice on the internet to determine if I'm the jerk in a situation, but here I am. The whole debacle started a few weeks ago when my stepmom, let's call her Karen, saw a comment I made on a Facebook post. It was one of those generic posts from a parenting page asking expectant parents if they thought having their moms in the delivery room would bring them comfort. I posted a simple response, something like, "I'd probably have my mom in the delivery room with me if she were still alive." Innocent enough, right? Well, apparently not. Karen messaged me on Facebook as soon as she spotted it, and well, let's just say she wasn't thrilled. "Hey there! Saw your comment on that post. Thought we should talk about it." I sighed when I saw her message. I wasn't in the mood for a conversation about this, but hey, I didn't want to ignore her. "Hey Karen, what's up? I saw your comments about having your mom in the delivery room, and you know I'm here for you, right? You can have me there." "Yeah, thanks, but that's not what I meant." "Well, it came across that way. I mean, most people would assume you have two moms. I think I'd be worthy of being invited." I tried to explain that my comment wasn't meant to embarrass her, it was just an honest expression of my feelings. "Karen, I didn't mean to embarrass you, it's just that when I said mom, I was referring to my birth mom." "But I'm your mom now too. You have two moms." And that's where it all went downhill. The backstory is essential here. I lost my mom when I was only 6 years old. My dad remarried just before I turned 8 and Karen wanted to adopt me. At the time, I was adamant that I didn't want that, and my dad, probably not wanting to waste money on a legal battle, sided with me. So I never officially became her child, and I never wanted a second mom. I saw her more as my dad's wife than a stepmom, but I used the term stepmom as a compromise to keep the peace. She had 4 sons with my dad and was a good mom to them, but I think she always longed for a daughter, which contributed to this whole mom thing. But Karen just wouldn't let the topic go. Every time she brought it up, I tried to change the subject, but it always came back to this idea that she should be in the delivery room with me. Then over the weekend, she brought it up again, and this time she went full throttle. "You know, you're already honoring your mom and mother-in-law with your daughter's name. When have you ever acknowledged me as your mom or even as your daughter's grandma? The least you could do is let me be there to support you, the way you dream your mom would." I took a deep breath. It was time to make things crystal clear. "Karen, I appreciate your concern, but I want my mom there. I've never considered you my mom, and I'm not comfortable having you in the delivery room." Karen was visibly upset and tried to pull my dad into the mess. Predictably, he refused to get involved. I couldn't blame him for that. He usually stayed out of these conflicts. "Well, if you didn't want me there, the least you could have done was delete those comments. You've made it clear you don't care about my feelings." So here I am, asking the internet if I'm the jerk for not wanting my stepmom in a delivery room. It's a complicated situation, and I'm just trying to navigate it as best as I can. ATA, the messages were DMs and not public. And now some comments on a post. Someone saying, "Not that jerk. Your feelings are valid, and it's essential for her to acknowledge and respect them. She voluntarily placed herself in a situation where she wasn't invited, and it has become evident that her presence wasn't desired either. You are under no obligation to allow anyone, aside from medical professionals, into the delivery room. Your well-being is paramount during this highly stressful event, and you should never feel compelled to include anyone who doesn't entirely align with your comfort level." Another commenter adds, "Not that jerk. OP, your stepmom's relentless pressure confirms that she is not the right person to have in a delivery room. How can she claim to be your greatest advocate while blatantly disregarding your expressed wishes? A third commenter goes with, not the jerk. And once and for all, childbirth is not a spectator sport. I am sorry your stepmother is offended, but she's not doing any good trying to demand a level of closeness that simply doesn't exist right now. This happened many years ago. Back when I was just a college student, I have ventured into the old neighborhood grocery store, which had seen better days. Security had been beefed up and the place had undergone some renovations, with bright lights and shiny displays trying to make the aging store look newer than it was. My mission was simple: find some plastic totes. Nothing fancy, just sturdy containers for the odds and ends that cluttered the back of my small Japanese pickup truck. As I strolled down the aisle filled with rows of totes and lids, I found myself lost in thought, contemplating which size would be best. Then out of nowhere, the tranquility of my shopping trip was shattered. The sound of dentures clicking and the abrupt collision of shopping carts pulled me back to reality. I looked over to see a woman who could easily be Cruella de Vil twin sister. She seemed determined to make my day less pleasant. Startled, I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Didn't see you there. I hope you have good cart insurance." I tried to use humor to diffuse the situation, but instead, it only seemed to infuriate her further. "Young man, if you're not too toppy to be a man, I've been waiting for you to assist me. Now give me a lid from there." She snapped at me. I was taken aback. She had assumed I worked there because I was wearing a red Eddie Bauer polar fleece vest my mom had given me. I mean, I knew red vests were a retail uniform thing, but this wasn't even a Target. Before I could correct her, she interrupted me again. "I'm going to get you fired. What do you think of that?" she hissed. I felt a knot of anxiety form in my stomach. Admittedly, I was working a part-time job elsewhere, and if I lost that, things would become financially tight. My thoughts must have been visible on my face because she pounced on my hesitation. "Yeah," she crowed triumphantly. "Just what do you think about that?" I leaned in closer toward her crooked, pointed finger and delivered the only retort that popped into my head, inspired by David Sedaris. "Yeah, well, I am going to have you killed," I said slowly and calmly, like a sharp whisper under my breath. I straightened up, maintaining a posture, and slowly began to back away. She sputtered, her eyes wide with fear, and then she shrieked something unintelligible before hastily retreating, her shopping cart in tow. I wondered if I really needed to shop there at all. Maybe I should just leave. But before I could take 3 steps to follow my flight instinct, the woman returned, sans cart with 2 employees in tow. "That's him! There he is! The employee you must fire!" she exclaimed, pointing an accusatory finger at me. The 2 employees looked baffled, as if they were trying to figure out if there was another smaller person hiding behind me. The manager, donned in a red vest like mine, seemed to finally grasp the situation. He instructed one of the employees to escort the woman around the corner while he turned to me with a stern expression. I explained, "I don't work here." She bumped into me with her cart and she threatened me. "I don't feel safe shopping here." The manager looked incredulous. "Wait, what? Call the police." "I genuinely don't feel safe with that woman around." She threatened me after ramming into my cart. "I would like to press charges, please." I replied firmly. As the woman returned, she unleashed a tirade of accusations, screaming, "He's going to kill me! Fire his butt!" The manager realized things had spiraled out of control, and in situations like this, the first one to lose their cool typically loses. I hadn't lost mine. I had calmly and quietly asked for police intervention, and I stood my ground. And so it went down. The police were called, and I gave my statement about the incident. Security footage confirmed that I had been standing there minding my own business when the woman had crashed into my cart. Her aggressive behavior, the bizarre threats, and her overall unhinged demeanor were all caught on camera. When asked about the death threats, I simply replied, "That's what made me feel unsafe. I didn't know how to respond to such craziness from an old woman." The situation was de-escalated and the police were professional in handling it. It was suggested that I continue my shopping, but I decided to do some browsing in other sections of the store before eventually leaving without buying anything. As I exited, I saw them loading the woman into a police car, her handcuffed and still resisting arrest. The manager approached me, somewhat surprised to see me again, and offered his apologies for the whole ordeal. He assured me that I was welcome to return to do my shopping. "Thanks for being a good sport," he added. "Rest assured, that woman won't be shopping here again, and we will be prosecuting her for criminal trespassing if she ever sets foot on our property again." And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.